Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for our 5th session of the Confidence Builder series for staff services. Whether this is your first session or you've been able to attend all 5, whether you have a staffing gap or you're not, everyone is welcome. We're super excited for everybody who's able to attend today. So what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to go through our regular our slides just to set the ground rules. So the goals and purpose of this series is to build confidence in your knowledge and skills, to discuss the tasks required of a staff services worker, to introduce improvements and new features in Volunteer Connection, to share practical tips for working in staff services, to provide an inclusive and collaborative environment, to discuss topics important to our activity, and to feel more prepared for your next deployment. And we hope that a lot of you have already felt that way. You know, if you've been able to attend a few of these sessions, that you already feel like you are a little more prepared for when you get that call. Before we get started, we ask everyone to please mute yourself and turn off your camera when you're not speaking. Feel free to ask questions and offer suggestions in chat. Our presenter today, Carl Gingrich, he is going to pause after the slides to allow questions too, so you can, so you know that if you do have a question, we will give you time to ask it. If you could please type your name and region in the chat, that's always fun to see who's here and then to give people the high fives. And we also are recording the session and providing transcription. So that's like always, again, just because there's so many people who are unable to attend on a Thursday afternoon at 1. So without any more ado, I'd like to introduce Carl Gingrich, who is the lead of the virtual lodging program. And Carl, thank you so much for coming and sharing your information and knowledge with us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
I will let you start sharing your screen.
I will do that. And give me a check whenever you can see my screen on your. Oh, wait a minute.
I see it. Looks good.
Okay. Let me get this back up here. Okay. I am Carl Gingrich. I'm the coordinator of the National Virtual Staff Lodging Team. And I've been doing this for, well, since the inception of the Virtual Lodging Team, which is about 4 years old. And what we're going to do today is this is an overview of the Volunteer Connection Lodging module. It is not training on the use of this module or these modules. In order to do the training, it would run into 2.5 hours at least. It is an extensive amount of training. There's generally a lot of questions, which causes it to run a little bit longer. And but we're not going to do that today. What I'm going to do is give you a flavor for what we do in the lodging module and what the virtual lodging team is all about. As was said, I will pause at the end of each slide to see if anybody's got any questions. The topics we're going to cover today are the VLT objectives, what we're all about. And then Volunteer Connection Lodging Enhancement modules. We're going to talk about the goals of the Volunteer Connection enhancements. And by the way, I live in a acronym-free zone, and so I'm going to explain the acronyms as I see them. VCN is Volunteer Connection. VLT is Virtual Lodging Team. CLC is our hotel vendor, Commercial Lodging Consultants. And Q&A is questions and answers. So as we hit any new ones, I'll try to say what those are, so that everybody's. I know whenever I hit somebody's talking in jargon, my thought process stops and I start going through my mind what does he mean by this? And so I'll try to cover these in advance. So I was on the goals of the Volunteer Connection enhancement. Then we're going to look at what the modules actually look like. And in that, we'll create a new, or I'll show you about creating a new hotel request, how we receive a new contract from our hotel vendor, CLC, and then how we assign workers to hotel rooms. We're going to talk a little bit about who can use the Volunteer Connection enhancement modules, and we'll talk about the job tools that we have available and what must be done by others. And then at the end, we'll have a Q&A, question and answer period for anything that you want to talk about then. But as we move along through this, I'll pause at the end of each one of these sections, and we will be able to answer your questions at that time. I will list this again at the end, but this is my contact information. I don't mind if somebody contacts me if they got questions about lodging, or if they've got questions about how we do it or anything of that nature. Problems in lodging typically, you know, if it's something specific to an operation, should be taken to the lodging person that's assigned to that job, because it'd end up, I would have to do that and they would be getting it secondhand. So anyways, but I'll put this up at the end, and if anybody has a need to call me, they can take my information and call me. The virtual lodging team objectives. Our clients are all MDA. MDA stands for Maximum Daily Allowance. And all MDA disaster relief operation workers are our clients. And our role for those clients are to provide excellent customer care and service. That is our #1 priority. We try to do that on every person that gets assigned to an operation who needs lodging. And our goal is that all MDA workers on a disaster relief operation have a clean and safe lodging experience at a reasonable cost. We are cost conscious, and while we're talking about that, you know, we don't sacrifice excellent customer care for cost. Now that's to a point, but for example, we don't willy-nilly put somebody in a staff shelter because it's cheaper. We don't put somebody in a hotel that's a little bit seedy because it's cheaper. If that ends up being the case, it's because we couldn't get rooms anyplace else. But we're very conscious of cost, and but like I said, at the same time, we also want to provide excellent customer care and service. And one of the things that is actually contrary to cost consciousness is that we have been all through COVID being on single person in a room occupancy in a hotel room, and where we used to be double up in rooms. That ended up Brad Kaiserman determined that that was a expense that we needed to take care of, and because it provided a better customer care for our MDA workers out there, and so we are remaining on a single room occupancy wherever is possible. And when I say that, there are times when we have hotel shortages, a lot of times that's, especially if we have a very large disaster, we don't always have sufficient hotel rooms in a given area within a reasonable driving distance. And we typically try to get that stay within a half an hour drive on those. But and a lot of times closer than that if we can. But we whenever they become whenever they start becoming scarce, we'll move that proximity out a bit. And but we don't like to go over a half an hour. But we'll double up people in a room if those hotels start getting scarce, and it means we're going to have to go to if it appears as though we continue with single persons in a room, and it's going to force us into using a staff shelter. Many times we will go and say we're going to double up rooms, and whenever we do that, we always ask permission from the workers in doing that, and and we also make sure that all the people on the job director, the workforce ADs, and the staff leads all know that that's what we're going to have to do. The lodging enhancements module, you can see it on here, right here. There's a lodging line. By the way, everybody's volunteer connection looks differently according to your access. So yours is not going to look exactly like mine. But it shows up on here. This is just one of them I pulled out. It's on a multi-family fire. But the lodging module has two icons on it, as you can see. And if you are in staff services on the job, you will be able to see these. Doesn't mean you're allowed to use them. That means that you'll see them. When we started looking at the enhancements to lodging, we wanted to make sure that we had certain things built into this because it was an all new system. And we had many people from many areas. I think there are probably some people on this call who served with us on that, on the systems requirements for this. We didn't get all the system requirements that we asked for, but we got many of them. I was very surprised on how far they went. But some of our goals that we used in arriving at these new lodging modules were we wanted to make sure that we were able to ensure that all MDA workers on a disaster relief operation can be accounted for easily and can be accounted for and easily identified. Somebody said my speaker sounds muffled. Let me move it closer to me. So, as I said, we wanted to make sure that we accounted for these folks, these MDA people on a job, and we could easily identify where they're at, where they're sleeping at, where they're, thank you, where they're, if we have to get in touch with them, we want to make sure that we know how to do that very quickly. And we wanted to provide a standard process and system to account for our MDA workers. Now, some of this implies we weren't doing that in the past, which we weren't. And there's something to be said about standardizing this so that when you go out on an operation or you're in staff services, you can depend on there's a way that we do lodging. or when you're a person that's being deployed, you can depend on this is the way we do lodging, and the way you'll get lodging when you arrive on that job. And with that, we wanted to provide for a standard training process. Obviously, you need that in order to have a standard process and system. And we wanted that training process to be available for anybody that's authorized to do disaster relief operation lodging. And finally, we wanted to make sure that we provided for cost efficiencies in our disaster relief operation lodging. And in that, we wanted to try to make sure that we had an early warning system when things start going awry. Lodging is a rather complex process. It has a lot of tentacles, and in that, typically, whenever you have a complex process, you also have a lot of ways that you can have waste in that process. And we knew we were having it, and so we wanted to be able to control that waste. And by the way, waste in our terms is rooms that we're paying for that there's nobody sleeping in. It's an empty room that I'm not looking at the chat, so please catch me at the end here. We wanted to have a way to be able to get an early warning system that whenever things start going awry, so we could get it corrected very quickly, and we could have monitors on that so that we can get that and get it very clear, so that we can get that corrected at once. So that if you have, for example, if you have empty rooms for no reason at all, then we wanted to be able to identify those and be able to get them closed if they're not needed. So I'll pause here, and if anybody's got a question, please ask. Just come off of mute and ask.
Hi, Carl. We have a couple of questions in the chat. If we could deal with those ones first.
Sure.
So the first one is from Sherry, and she's asking if you had touched on the shared rooms, the double occupancy, and wondering if we're back to shared rooms now, and if so, if we're placing vaccinated workers together.
Well, first of all, we don't know who's vaccinated, and that I know that information's out there. Well, I don't know if they're even keeping that up to date anymore, but we are not sharing rooms. You'll be in a single room. And that's going to be that way as long as we can do that. If we have scarce rooms, we might have to go to double occupancy in a room. And on that, I always tell the folks when we're starting to think like we might have to do that, to call the people or text them and find out if they're willing to share a room with somebody.
So I can just mention, because I was recently on the New Mexico disaster relief operation, and we did offer that shared occupancy to some of the people who are going up there because we were out of hotel rooms. And so it was something that we looked into, because most people were more willing to share a room with one person than go to a staff shelter. So I know that it is definitely out there right now.
Yeah.
Let's see.
It's not our preferred method.
Right. Absolutely. Yep. And then Sherry also asks, how does a worker notify lodging that they do not feel safe at their hotel? What steps are taken?
You notify on an operation, you would call the lodging 24-hour number and or see somebody in staff services and tell them that and give specific reasons why you say that. Typically what we do whenever somebody gets a hold of me and says we have people that think that are lodging or a hotel is unsafe. I always look and see if we got an LSAP person on the operation, and I ask the LSAP person to go out and make an investigation of the hotel and give us a report on it, and I follow their recommendations.
And LSAP stands for?
LSAP stands for life.
I think it's safety.
Life safety and asset protection.
Yeah, asset protection. It's our kind of our pseudo policeman.
Got it. And then where would someone find the 24-hour lodging phone number?
In the IAP, the Incident Action Report.
Perfect. Thank you. I don't see any more questions, so I think just a sec. Okay, so let's see, I'm trying to catch up here. It says Melissa saying, addressing the potential elephant in the room. If we care about the safety and well-being of the workforce, we need to know who is vaccinated or reestablish COVID protocols for all offices, headquarters, and shelters. So I think that's a great comment, Melissa. Probably not one that Carl is ready to address.
I would advise you to take that to the COVID task force. Jill Neiman. She could give you a better answer than I could. Any other questions? If not, we will move on. We create a new hotel room. Obviously, unless we have a hotel room vacant, we always have to create a new hotel room if we have new people coming onto the job. And later you'll see how we know that there's a new person coming on the job. But we make a request, and it's all within Volunteer Connection. All this is within Volunteer Connection. And but we put in the working location for this hotel that we want. We want to be near this. We want to be in a proximity of this working location. We want to put in how many beds that we need. Actually, beds equate to rooms now. And if it's any special rooms that we need, like ADA rooms. ADA stands for Americans for Disability, something or other. It's a handicap room. And then we have comments, and we have some standardized comments that we put on there. We put on there that this is worker lodging. If we can get an address, we try to say what address we want to get that close to. In other words, we don't say, I want a room in Miami, Florida. You have to get down to, at a minimum, we'll ask for a zip code that we need to have this close to, and or within that zip code, if possible. And we down here at the bottom it says submit. That creates a request to CLC. CLC being our vendor, and CLC then acts on that, and the next slide will tell us what we're going to do with it once it's filled. Any questions on this?
Carl, just to clarify, is this a request that's submitted by staff services or by the lodging specialist assigned to the DR?
Lodging specialist.
Thank you.
Anything else? Obviously, when CLC fulfills that request, they send us a reservation back, and we complete a new contract that in essence makes a contract for that hotel, those hotel rooms. And I highlighted the areas that are of interest to us. That is, we got 3 rooms, and we want to know how much that's going to cost. And in this case, it was 75.50. And there can be some comments on this. We can say, like, for example, this room was for Joe Smith, or, you know, that we could say that this is an ADA room. Anything that'll help us in the future in identifying this, or making additional information that we need to keep track of on that room. Now, and there's a banner up here at the top that says, once you save this, it will create rooms. It'll create 3 rooms in Volunteer Connection, in our boxes, if you will, in Volunteer Connection, and allow us then to assign rooms. Any questions on that? I see a hand up.
Yes, I have a question. Is that a default start and end date? 1 week?
No, we put in we in our request, in the previous request, where we made a request, we tell them when this is going to start and what the checkout date will be.
Thank you.
And we typically don't know for sure what that checkout date is. So we, you know, typically you got a 14-day assignment. If it's the front end of a DR standing up, we typically take it out 2 weeks. And once they get going for a while, we might trim that back to a week. And we can always modify these contracts and extend the dates. Any other questions? Once we have the rooms built in Volunteer Connection, we then assign workers to a room. There's other things that goes on in here, but like I said, this is an overview. And assigning those workers, we have a dashboard, and I've highlighted some of the items on that dashboard, some of the items that we use and watch. It tells us how many down here. We see that we have 37 MDAs on scene here. It shows you that we have one person, one MDA on scene that needs lodging. We know we got to get a room for that person. And if I click on this, what it does, I'd clicked on this one in advance. But when we click on this, it'll tell us who that one person is. And we have 17 MDAs en route that will be needing lodging. And we have 2 empty rooms. When we go to assign a worker to a room, down here you see it says assign. That's assigning a new person into a room. You assign them. And by clicking on that, it will bring up a little panel that will tell us what hotels are available and what rooms are available, and we put that person in a room. When we put that in the room, put that person in the room, when we submit that assignment, it sends a text message to the worker and tells them that they have a hotel room in whatever hotel this is. And we typically on that, we will write a comment that once they get there, they should send a text message to the person, to the lodger's cell phone number, telling them what the room number is. Because we don't know what the hotels don't assign rooms to people until they arrive. And so we need to know what that room number is. They typically will send the text message back to you, and and tell you when they get there, they'll tell you what room number they're in, and now we've identified that person, we got them in a hotel, we know where they're at, and we know what room they're in that hotel. Any questions on that?
Hey, Carl, it's Ron.
Yeah.
On the
Hi, Ron.
MDA en route that need lodging, the 17 shown on that screen.
Yeah.
Can you tell what day they need lodging, or do you need to refer back to the arrival report?
That's one of the things that we're looking at and working on. We're tweaking this thing as we go along, and one of the problems that we're having, and I'm going to address that in this problem in a little while. One of the problems we're having is that date that they have on there is the date that the deployment person who deployed them out in the region puts on their assignment record. Unfortunately, there's a default on there. That default is today's date plus 1. And because they're to fly out, within 24 hours. Many times that's not the correct date. It might be 2 days from now. It might be, if they're within the region, it might be today. And we're working on that and trying to get this. Right now, this is based on the assignment record, as I said. We had a discussion on this today, and we're trying to get that so that we can get the information in an enhanced. They can't do that now. It'll be on an enhancement release, but trying to get that so that it takes into consideration the date that they're going to be flying into here from Carson Wagonhut.
That makes sense. Thank you for that explanation. Let's say that they assign them with the correct arrival date. Mm-hmm. Does that arrival date show up anywhere in your lodging queue, or is it just on the arrival report itself that you pull out of queries?
The arrival date is right here.
So you would click on that 17 to look for all of those dates.
Yes.
Gotcha. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And another one that we're trying to get to, one of the things that we're trying to do is minimize the number of empty rooms. But I can't click on this and tell where these open beds, up here's the open beds. Got 2. And I want to be able to click on this and be able to tell me where those empty beds are. Right now we can't. We have to go to a manual report to find out where they're at. And that's not satisfactory to me. And we want to be able to have everything right here and not have to go same way here. We don't want to, because we're using the assignment record, we end up having to go out and look at the arrival roster and the air travel roster to make sure that the arrival dates are accurate on here.
Hey, Carl, there's a couple questions in the chat. I was wondering if you want to look at those now.
Sure, go ahead.
All right. So it starts with Marilyn says, sometimes volunteers are placed in not so nice hotels. Is there any way Red Cross can check out the hotels before we place volunteers in them? And then Ron responds, assigning responders to rooms requires situational awareness as far as hotels, locations of hotels versus the responder work locations. And then Melissa suggested, how about getting input from local DAT teams if available, or offered checking out the local motels? Is that something that we can give input to CLC about hotels?
We can. Typically, when we have an unsatisfactory hotel, for whatever reason, and most generally this is for safety reasons, but not always. It can be for health reasons. That we report those hotels to CLC and tell them that we do not wish to use that hotel any longer in the future. And so that the next time that it bubbles up, we're in that area again, they won't be used again.
Got it.
As for getting a specific hotel, we do that all the time. We get input from people that are located there in that area. You know, they have to be on the job, of course. I mean, we wouldn't have access to anybody else. And
Mhm.
and you know, we ask them if you know, do you have a hotel in that area? You know, many times I've run into, yeah, we got a hotel right across the street from headquarters, and what's the name of it? and so we're going to obviously try to use that, you know,
Too handy. Yeah.
unless now we get hotel rooms that have a cost within U.S. government per diem, and CLC stays within that per diem. If they cannot get anything within that per diem, and by the way, that per diem goes by county almost, and if they can't get any hotels within that per diem, then they have to get permission or authorization to use that hotel from staff services, National Staff Services.
So the per diem so you said it varies by county. What would you say is like the average cost of a hotel room these days?
That's all over the place.
Is it?
Let's say approximately $100.
Okay. So Neil, I was wondering if you would like to come off mute and ask your question.
So my question is about the when you're showing records for people en route, can you show the records in the air travel roster? Because that's the most relevant information for at least people who are flying in for when they're arriving.
When they created this, they didn't use the air travel roster. They used the volunteer connection dates. This is subject to change, but the change is, you know, this is the Red Cross. The change is subject to budgets, and we box things together for enhanced versions or enhanced releases and so forth. That you know, we don't do this. You know, say, okay, change the system for this right now. They won't do it. I don't know if that answered your question, Neil, but.
There's a question from Ron. He says, can hotel motels be loaded into NSS? And that's I think the National Shelter System if they are pre-inspected. I don't know that.
No, well, CLC doesn't have access to NSS.
To NSS. Okay.
And it was answered lower or farther on the chat by Jean.
Okay, perfect. And then Spencer asks, does the system automatically list a room as open again when the person previously occupying it is out processed from the DRO? Also, is it still manual to work with hotels to let them know the names of the people who they should expect, as well as when the rooms need to be cleaned between occupants?
Yes. Yes, no, yes. We put an end date on the room whenever that person is going to leave. Whenever that person is going to out process, we put an end date on that room. What that does is it takes the room out of there. It did not take it out of CLC. It takes it out of here. And CLC, we might still have that room rented. And if we got somebody else coming in, we will call the hotel and ask them to clean the room. And we'll put another person in that same room. And I don't remember the other question. There was 3 questions and I don't remember the other one.
I know, sorry. So I should have split them up. So is it still manual to work with the hotels to let them know the names of the people who are coming in?
No. No, we have a report that is prepared, that has the people, or the people that are going to be showing up, that we send to the hotel daily.
Okay,
That report, it lists the people that are coming in. And we just cut and paste it and send it off to the hotels.
perfect. Are responders still signing in when they check into a hotel? Is there still a sign-in sheet?
I believe there's typically a sign-in sheet. The main purpose for that sign-in sheet is for the hotel, because the hotel has to verify that a Red Cross worker is in that room. And we merely used it in the past. There is another new system coming out called DCI, disaster check-in, daily check-in, and that goes out to all the workers on the job, and daily, and it lists things like who's your supervisor, what hotel room are you in, what's your working location, various things like that. And whenever any of those are incorrect, then you reply with a notification to them, and they will be corrected. So we don't have a reason for the check-in sheet anymore.
Got it. So Neil has a suggestion. He says DRs seem to have different policies for whether a responder should check out of the room when they leave or just ask for it to be cleaned. Would it be useful to standardize our instructions for our responders?
Yes, obviously it would. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But what you need to do is to just check out of the room when you leave. You don't need to tell them to clean the room or anything like that. That's up to the lodging specialist on the job.
Okay, perfect. I think that's most of our questions, unless anybody's raising. I don't see any raised hands. So
I don't see any either.
okay, perfect.
Okay.
Thanks.
We will move on then. Who can use the volunteer connection enhancement modules? Trained lodging specialists are the only authorized users of these modules. We do have extensive training, not only instructor-led training, but we have one-on-one training for people. We have mentors who help people out when they get assigned to a job, an operation, and they need to, they hold their hand as much as they need it to get things right. We want to make sure that everybody is doing lodging according to the standards and procedures, and the mentor will help them out in that. The CLC lodging request form, the old request form that you sometimes used, is no longer usable for worker lodging. If you send one to CLC, they are to they've been informed to disregard those requests. The only way that they are used is to be used for client lodging. Obviously, if we're doing non-congregate sheltering and we're putting clients in hotel rooms, we can't put them through volunteer connection, and so that's useful for still there, useful only for client lodging, and CLC has been informed that that's the only thing they're to be used for, and there's a list that they have of people who can authorize the use of them in case we have to use them. For example, if volunteer connection is down, we cannot create the request, and so we'll have to have a backup for that. And at that time, I would be calling CLC and telling them that we will be submitting for this DR by paper request. and then they would use it. Right now, we've trained over 60 lodging specialists on the virtual lodging team to serve disaster relief operations. We have several virtual lodging team members who are mentors, who are available for questions and answers during a DRO. They're very good at this. They know how to get people started and how to hold their hand until they need to run on their own. And what we found is that that when we had to assign somebody, and I had to assign somebody today, it was the first time they used the new modules, and I told the mentors to get in touch with them so that they can get them started. Because what they've noticed is even though they went through training, a lot of them have went through training 2 and 3 times, and it's the same training. But you know, it lays for a while, and they don't know just exactly where to start at. You know, how do you do this? And you know, you can sit there and stare at the icons forever, and it's not going to help you out. And the system is not. If you do lodging a lot, it's intuitive. If you don't, it's not intuitive, because there's ways that you have to get into things differently. And so we want to make sure that anybody that's using these are well trained. We've had examples of where they didn't have the proper training, and we've had to take them off the job. It's one of the things, if you recall, one of the things that we wanted to know was we wanted early warning signals that that something is going awry here, and it was like on a continuing basis, it was going awry, and it never did. It never did work out. Anyone using the enhancement modules must use the job tools and the best practices tools. We've made a very extensive, I think it must be about 15 pages long, best practices tool, job tool. And we expect that to be followed. We expect the job tools to be followed to the letter. And again, this is that standardization so that lodging is the same no matter what operation you're on. And we've also have a document that's called Management of Worker Lodging on a DRO. This was just recently made because there were some questions about if you're on the VLT and you're assigned to an operation, who do you report to? And well, the answer to that, by the way, is the operation. And you don't report to myself. You report to the operation. You come back to the virtual lodging team members for technical advice, questions that's specific to lodging, and those types of things.
Carl, speaking of job tools, there's one question that is relating to job tools from Ron, and he's wondering, is there a job tool on how to back out of P-card charges and other externally funded charges?
That is in our best practices. I'm pretty sure it is.
Okay, so that's in that pack of tools. Okay, perfect.
I'm pretty sure it is in there. Any other questions?
Veronique was wondering if they create a tip sheet for how to use the module, and I think you said yes, you certainly
best
do.
Practices. In fact, it's called Best Practices and Tips.
Perfect. And then Neil's wondering if there's a link to the job tool or if you can provide that for us.
The job tool is available to everybody that's been trained.
Okay, And so I imagine you're going to be talking about how to get trained coming up.
I will.
Thank you.
Anything else? Job tools. Speaking of job tools, all lodging must adhere to these documents. Requesting and receiving, there's a job tool for requesting and receiving lodging. There's a job tool for vendor cancellation and modification request and the confirmation process. And there's the best practices and tips. And there's the management and implementation of worker lodging on a DRO. Those are all three, will be all three. Like I said, these are provided to people who are trained. Nobody else would have the reason to have these, but these are available to anybody that's been trained for lodging. To get training for lodging, I was going to talk about this at the end, but I might as well talk about it right now. To get training, I will show you my contact information. Give me a call. If you'd like to join us on the virtual lodging team, the only ones that are trained right now are those that are on the virtual lodging team. We did train for knowledge or for familiarization. Many people in staff services and others, workforce ADs, those kinds of folks. We had training for them. It was a kind of a. It wasn't a full training. It was more. There were some things that were left out of it that we didn't think were pertinent, and it was only 2 hours long. And but just give me a call, send me an email, and we'll get you involved in training. We will be having a training in latter, I think it's later on this same month, May. And yeah, and once you take the training, I'll probably talk to you about being on the virtual lodging team. Typically the ones that, I send out an email to every job that starts, that is on the dock. Once it hits the dock, I send out an email to them, informing them if they need virtual lodging support. We have people available for them, and those folks will answer me in some way. A lot of times it's a multifamily fire, and they say we have no need for lodging because it's being handled by DAT teams. And but many times, as we did today, I got an answer right back saying, yes, please. And that was for Oklahoma tornadoes. And so we got somebody from the virtual, the ones I can send out are the ones on the virtual lodging team. And so I do that. Any questions on this?
So Carl, if someone's interested, they should just email you?
Yes.
Okay. And that would be for the training coming
Yeah.
up? Okay.
Yeah. And I'll put up my contact information on the next slide, I think.
Sounds good.
What needs to be done by others? This would typically be staff services. So all you in staff services, listen up, please. Or really, those that deploy people. MDA must be coded correctly. You saw back there where we saw it said that how many MDAs were en route, how many MDAs needed lodging, and so forth. If they're not coded as an MDA, they don't go on there. And what's the criteria for MDA? I could well imagine I've heard probably 5 different definitions of an MDA, and there's only one. And that is if a worker is more than 50 miles at their work location from their home of record, they are an MDA. It has nothing to do with a mission card. It has to do with you're going to be in you're going to be in a hotel or staying with family and friends. You're more than 50 miles from your work location. This is critical that it's coded correctly. As you could see, if it isn't, it's going to be, if it isn't coded correctly, there's two things that are going to happen. One is we won't have information on them unless we look at the, you know, which we do. We look at the air travel roster and we see the difference, and then we go in and get the MDA corrected. If you're on a deployment team and you're telling the person the next thing they have to do is to call Carson Wagonlit, they are an MDA. Because they're going to need a hotel when they get there. And if they're not, if you don't have that correct, planning is skewed. That the 5266 information, that this is going to change, but the 5266 information is not correct, and planning is not done correctly. So it's critical that this get done correctly. If you're on a deployment team, then make certain that the MDA is coded correctly. Like I said, if they're calling Carson Wagonlit afterwards, they are an MDA. Whether you gave them a mission card or not has no bearing on it. And the expected arrival date is correct, so that we know when they're going to need that room. Never in process any worker before they are present on the DRO. We've been seeing people on operations that are in processing people as soon as they show up on the arrival roster. But they aren't there yet. I don't know why they do that, but they do. If a person's not standing in front of you, if you're doing in processing in SPS work, you know, that you unless they're standing in front of you, they should not be in processed. Out process all workers when they leave the DRO. That's important to get their lodging taken care of. If there is a geographical movement around the DRO, some of these very large DROs, I'm going to wrap up in about a minute. Use the change form. It's on the toolkit. Use the change form to show that, for example, you got DA people. DA people run all over the place, and they move and they put them in different hotel rooms. Make sure that you use that change form to get those folks changed and notifying lodging of that change in hotels, so they can get them out of one hotel and put them in another. If you know a worker is moving locations, let lodging know as soon as you know it. They should be the second person to know. Veronica, the change form is on the exchange in the staff services toolkit. Don't hold this information back and say, well, I'll wait until 5 o'clock so I can tell them we got 3 people. No, let lodging know as soon as you know that somebody needs lodging at a different location right away. If you have questions on any of this, send me an email or call me. The accuracy of our lodging depends on this being correct. Any questions on any of that?
I know we only just have a minute, Carl. Ron is wondering if the VLT does all the reconciliation of the CLC reports that come out multiple times a day.
The cumulative report, we use the cumulative reports to make sure that our rooms are accurate.
Perfect. And I thought I saw a hand up, but maybe it's back down now.
No, I think that was me. Sorry.
Oh yeah, no worries.
This is Luann. Carl, you might have mentioned this, but I might have missed it. But what is the procedure for staffing? Does staffing just call or email their virtual lodging person to let them know what rooms are needed, or is there some automated system that staff services uses to let lodging know they need rooms?
Well, we know for new for new people coming onto the operation, we know what those are.
Even,
don't-
even if they're not flying in, if they're driving in by rental car or POV, you still will know.
They're on the arrival roster. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So, and then if somebody needs to just change a room, then I know there's a
If
form
somebody-
for that, so,
If
okay.
if somebody in staff services knows that, doesn't hurt you to tell the lodging.
Okay, thank you.
That it?
I think so.
I'm down to questions and answers, and here's my contact information. If anybody needs it, I'll just leave it up on there. Anybody got any overall questions?
I think most people asked them as we went along.
Okay, that's fine.
And they know how to reach you, Carl. Thank you so much for coming on today and sharing all this information. It's really, it's so much easier and better now than it was even just a year ago. It's amazing.
Yeah, and it's getting better. We're tweaking it, and our developers are working with us to tweak it, and we appreciate that.
Well, thanks again for coming on today. And for everyone else, we will be meeting again in a week from now. Our guest speaker will be Marcus Diddy, and he's going to be talking